It was still dark when the knocking started, hard, fast, and deliberate. I jolted awake, heart hammering. The clock on my bedside table glowed 5:03 a.m. Who would show up at this hour unless something was terribly wrong? Throwing on my sweatshirt, I hurried down the hallway, the echo of each knock syncing with my pulse. When I opened the door, my neighbor Ethan Cross stood there, his face pale as winter, breath visible in the cold air. "Don't go to work today," he said, his voice low and trembling. "Whatever happens, stay inside." For a moment, I just stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who joked or dramatized anything. He was quiet, distant, the kind of neighbor who nodded politely from across the lawn and disappeared inside before you could start a conversation. Now, he looked like someone who had seen something he couldn't unsee. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked. "Did something happen?" He shook his head, scanning the street nervously before meeting my eyes again. "I can't explain it right now. Please, promise me you won't leave the house today." My stomach tightened. There was something in his tone, something that made me believe him even without understanding why. "You're scaring me," I said quietly. "Why shouldn't I go?" He hesitated for a second, then whispered, "You'll understand by noon." And before I could speak again, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the fog that still hung over the street. For a long moment, I stood there frozen, hand still on the door handle. The morning was silent except for the wind brushing through the trees and the faint chirp of a bird too early to be awake. I should have felt silly. It was probably nothing, a misunderstanding. Maybe Ethan was half asleep or confused. But deep inside, something about that warning unsettled me. My instincts, the ones that rarely failed me, told me not to ignore it. There was also another reason I couldn't dismiss what he'd said so easily. 3 months ago, I'd lost my father, Dr. Daniel Hartman, to what doctors called a sudden heart attack. But the night before his death, he'd told me there was something important he needed to show me. When I asked what it was, he'd just said, "It's about who we really are, Lena. It's time you knew the truth." We never had that conversation. And since then, strange things had started to happen. A black SUV parked near my house for hours. My phone ringing from blocked numbers with silence on the other end. My younger brother sending messages from abroad, asking if I'd noticed anyone new in the neighborhood. I'd laughed it off before, thinking I was overthinking, until Ethan showed up at my door this morning. "My name is Lena Hartman, 34 years old, senior data consultant at Vanguard Analytics, and someone who has never skipped a workday without a reason. My life is predictable. Gym, office, sleep, a schedule my friends tease me for. So that morning, when I texted my boss that I couldn't come in due to an emergency, it felt strange, out of character. By 9 a.m., I'd had 3 cups of coffee and too many thoughts. The sky was clearing, and the street outside looked painfully ordinary. The longer I sat there, the more foolish I felt. Maybe Ethan had a breakdown. Maybe I'd just wasted a perfectly normal workday. But at 11:36 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID read unknown. "Hello," I answered. A calm, official voice replied, "Ms. Hartman, this is Detective Pierce with the City Police Department. Are you aware of the incident that occurred at your workplace this morning?" My heart dropped. "Incident? What kind of incident?" The officer sighed softly. "There was an armed attack at your building. Several employees were injured. We've confirmed fatalities. We're trying to account for all staff members, including you." My voice barely came out. "That can't be right. I wasn't there today." There was silence, then the officer spoke again, more cautiously. "Ms. Hartman, we have footage showing your car entering the underground parking lot at 7:58 a.m. Your company ID was used to enter the elevator system. Witnesses claim to have seen you on the 3rd floor shortly before the attack." My grip on the phone tightened. "That's impossible," I said. "I've been home all morning." "Can anyone confirm that?" he asked. I looked around my empty living room. The walls, the clock, the quiet. "No," I whispered. "I live alone." "Ms. Hartman," the officer continued, his voice colder now, "your belongings were recovered near the scene. We need to speak with you in person. Please stay where you are. Units are being dispatched to your location." My mind went blank. Someone had used my car, my ID, my identity. And then I remembered Ethan's face, like that fear, that warning. "Don't go to work today." I hung up, my hand shaking. Every sound in the house felt magnified. The refrigerator hum, the creak of the floorboards. Then came another knock at the door. 3 short, controlled raps. I froze. "Lena," a voice called softly. "It's Ethan, open the door." My pulse thundered. "How did you know the police would call me?" I asked through the wood. "Because they're not coming to help you," he replied. "They're coming to take you." "What are you talking about?" "They think you were involved," he said quickly. "You weren't supposed to survive today, Lena. The attack wasn't random. It was built around your name. You were meant to be the one they'd blame." My knees weakened. "That's insane." "Listen to me," he interrupted, his voice urgent now. "Your father tried to protect you from this. He knew it was coming." The words hit me like ice water. "My father?" I whispered. Ethan's tone softened. "He wasn't just a scientist, Lena. He was part of something classified, something that involved you." Before I could respond, distant sirens began to wail through the neighborhood, closing in fast. Ethan's eyes hardened. "We have to leave, now!" The world outside my window had fallen into an eerie silence. The sirens that once echoed through the neighborhood had faded, replaced by the low hum of engines in the distance. Gabriel sat across from me in the car, his expression unreadable, eyes scanning every passing street as if danger could emerge from the shadows at any second. I clutched the small black envelope tighter. My father's handwriting, those few trembling lines, still echoed in my mind. "You are not in danger because of anything you did. You are in danger because of who you are." The words refused to settle. They spun inside my head, making it hard to breathe, hard to believe that any of this could possibly be real. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "To a place your father built," Gabriel replied without looking at me. "Somewhere safe, somewhere they won't find us right away." His calm tone only heightened my unease. "You said they?" I said slowly. "Who are they exactly? The government? Some organization?" Gabriel's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Not the government you know," he said. "A division that operates outside of public oversight. A network created decades ago under the guise of national security. Your father stumbled upon their experiments, projects that should never have existed." A chill ran through me. "Experiments?" He nodded. "Biogenetic programs, artificial evolution. They were trying to alter human DNA to create individuals with enhanced resistance to disease, biological warfare, even aging. It was supposed to be the next step in protecting humanity, but it became something else, something darker. They started selecting bloodlines, manipulating genetics. And when your father uncovered what they'd done," Gabriel's voice trailed off. "He tried to expose them. That's why they silenced him." I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "You're saying my father was murdered?" Gabriel gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Yes. And his death was meant to erase every trace of what he discovered, including you." The car hit a rough patch of road, jolting me from my thoughts. I turned toward the window, watching as the city thinned into countryside. Trees closed in on both sides, tall and silent, their shadows stretching long across the asphalt. I thought about my father's last days, how restless he'd been, how often he'd checked the locks at night. He'd started writing notes in a cipher I couldn't understand, and once I'd caught him burning papers in the fireplace long after midnight. I had assumed he was just grieving after my mother's passing. Now I realized he'd been protecting me. "What do they want with me?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Gabriel hesitated. "They want control over your name, your body, your narrative. You are the key to validating everything your father uncovered. If they can frame you, they can bury the truth under the label of national threat. Once that happens, everything your father fought to protect disappears." My chest tightened. "But how can they even do that? I didn't do anything wrong." Gabriel's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "That's what makes you useful. You're clean, credible, a blank slate, which means they can rewrite your story however they want, and the world will believe it." I pressed my hand to my forehead, trying to steady myself. "Then what's in that vault? The one you said my father left?" "The proof," Gabriel said simply. "Documents, recordings, genetic data, all of it. It's the only thing that can clear your name and expose them." We drove in silence for several minutes. The road curved sharply, then opened into a wide stretch of forest. The air seemed thicker here, heavier. I could sense the isolation pressing in from all sides. Gabriel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metallic card with a crimson emblem etched in the center. "Your father gave this to me before he died," he said. "It's an access key. Without your DNA, it's useless. But with it, we can open the vault." The emblem shimmered faintly in the dim light. I didn't recognize the design, but something about it felt familiar. A circle intersected by a single vertical line, almost like a symbol I had seen on an old ring my father used to wear. We turned down a dirt path that wound through dense trees. Branches scraped against the car's sides as we moved deeper into the woods. Eventually, the road opened into a clearing. At its center stood what looked like a derelict storage facility, half buried in the earth, vines crawling up its concrete walls. "This is it?" I asked softly. "This is where the truth starts," Gabriel said, cutting the engine. As soon as we stepped out, the sound of the forest closed around us. No birds, no wind, just the hum of insects and the faint rustle of leaves. The air smelled like damp earth and rusting metal. Gabriel led me toward a reinforced steel door built into the hillside. A keypad and biometric scanner were embedded beside it. "Place your hand here," he instructed. I hesitated. What if it doesn't work? "It will," he said firmly. "Your father made sure of that." I pressed my palm against the scanner. A soft hum vibrated under my skin, followed by a faint blue glow that spread outward in thin lines like veins of light. After a few seconds, the scanner emitted a sharp click, and the heavy door began to slide open. Cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of dust and forgotten years. Gabriel motioned for me to follow. Inside, narrow fluorescent lights flickered to life one by one, revealing a long corridor lined with sealed storage units. The deeper we went, the more my chest tightened, as though something inside me recognized this place. At the end of the hall was another door, round, metallic, engraved with the same symbol that had been on the keycard. Gabriel inserted the card and turned it slowly. The lock disengaged with a hiss, and the door opened into a circular chamber. The room was filled with black file boxes, each marked with coded numbers. In the center stood a glass pedestal holding a single leather-bound journal. I felt my knees weaken. "That's my father's handwriting," I whispered. Gabriel gave me a nod. "It's time you see what he died protecting." My hands trembled as I lifted the journal from its case. Inside, the first page was marked with a note written in hurried strokes. "Alyssa, if you are reading this, then they have found you. Do not trust what you see. You are not what they told you. You were never meant to be part of their creation. You are the proof of its failure. Your blood is not engineered, it's evolved. They fear you because you are natural. You are what they could never replicate." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. Gabriel stepped closer, his voice low. "Now you understand why they can't let you live freely. You are living evidence that their work was unnecessary, that nature already succeeded where they failed." I closed the journal, my heartbeat echoing through the chamber. For the first time since this began, I wasn't sure if I was terrified or powerful. Outside, faint engine sounds broke the stillness. Gabriel's eyes darted to the ceiling. "They've tracked us." He reached for my hand. "We have to move, right now." And as we rushed toward the exit, clutching the only proof that could save my life, I realized the truth wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a war. After that incident, the house never felt the same. The laughter that once filled the walls was replaced by silent tension and forced politeness. My mother avoided me at every turn, and my father barely looked me in the eyes. The very people who once cheered for me at every milestone now acted like my success was an embarrassment. One evening, as I passed by the living room, I overheard my parents talking. "She's turning into her mother," my mom said sharply, "always thinking she's better than everyone else." "Calm down, Nadia," my father replied in a low tone. "She's young. Maybe she just needs a reality check." I froze. Turning into her mother? That line burned in my chest. I was her daughter. My mother's daughter. What did she even mean by that? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what she said. It wasn't the first time she'd compared me to someone I didn't understand. Every time I brought up my late grandmother, my mom would shut down the topic. "She wasn't who you think she was," she'd say. I never knew why. So the next morning, I decided to find out for myself. I went into the storage room, dusty, dimly lit, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. After digging for nearly an hour, I found a small wooden chest labeled A. Khan. That was my grandmother's name. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were old photos, letters, and a diary wrapped in a faded red ribbon. I flipped open the diary. They said I was a disgrace for leaving him, but they never understood the bruises I hid, or the nights I cried silently while everyone praised our perfect marriage. My throat tightened. Each page revealed more about my grandmother's life, her abusive husband, the family's obsession with reputation, and how she was disowned when she left to protect herself and her child. And suddenly, everything made sense. My mother grew up without her mother. The same people who now shamed me once shamed her. History was repeating itself. Only this time, she was on the other side of the cruelty. Tears blurred my vision as I read one last entry. If my daughter ever finds this, I want her to know. Silence is not respect. Obedience is not love. Stand up, even if your voice shakes. That line hit me harder than anything I'd ever read. I clutched the diary close and went straight to my mom's room. She was sitting by the window, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to see me. "Mom," I said softly, holding out the diary. "I found Grandma's things." She froze, her face went pale. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "In the storage room," I said. "You never told me she went through all this." She didn't respond. Her hands started shaking. For the first time, I saw not anger, but guilt in her eyes. "I didn't want you to know," she finally said. "I hated her for leaving me, for choosing herself over us." I swallowed hard. She didn't choose herself, she survived. Silence filled the room, the same kind that feels heavy, not peaceful. "She was a disgrace," my mom whispered. "Everyone said it. I believed them because I didn't know the truth. And when you started standing up for yourself, when you stopped caring about what people said, She stopped mid-sentence, her voice breaking. "I saw her in you, and I panicked." It was the first time I had ever seen her cry. For a long time, we just sat there. No shouting, no defense, just tears. She reached out and held my hand. "I'm sorry, Daisy. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you quiet. I didn't realize I was doing to you what they did to me." In that moment, I understood her pain. But forgiveness wasn't instant. It needed time. Healing always does. Days passed, and something began to change. My mom started joining me in the kitchen again. My father began to talk more gently. Even my nephew stopped making cruel jokes, maybe because he saw no one laughed anymore when he did. A week later, my mom knocked on my door. She was holding the same diary, but this time it looked different. She had added photos of me, of her, of Grandma. "I want to end this cycle," she said quietly. "No more silence, no more shame." For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about understanding why someone became who they are and choosing to be different. That night, I baked a small cake again. Same flavor, same frosting. But this time it wasn't for a celebration. It was a symbol. I placed it on the same table where my first one was destroyed. My family gathered around, uncertain but willing. I cut the cake, handed a slice to my mom, and said, "Let's start again." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Let's." That was the moment our story stopped being about shame and started being about strength. After that night, something inside me shifted, quietly but powerfully. The same girl who once broke down after her family's laughter now stood taller, calmer, and strangely freer. I no longer sought validation from the people who once defined my worth. I was done trying to be enough for them. In the weeks that followed, I started focusing on myself again. I picked up my old notebook, the one filled with half-written dreams and forgotten goals. I'd always wanted to start a small home bakery, not just for profit, but to share my passion for baking with others. But my mother's constant disapproval had made me doubt that dream. Now, with her silent support and my new courage, I decided it was time. I began by selling cakes to neighbors, birthdays, baby showers, even small family gatherings. At first, orders were slow, but soon word spread. People loved my cakes, not just for their taste, but for the emotion behind them. Each design told a story about love, loss, or healing, and every time I handed over a cake, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, as I was decorating a vanilla cake with soft pink flowers, my mother entered the kitchen quietly. You're busy, she said, watching me work. I nodded with a smile. A little. It feels good, though. She looked around at the bowls, frosting bags, and chaos on the counter. Your grandmother would have been proud, she whispered. Those words hit deeper than she probably realized. It was the first time she had spoken kindly of her mother in years. I think she'd be proud of you, too, I replied. Her eyes softened, and she helped me clean up without saying another word. A few days later, I was invited to speak at a small community event for young women. The topic was finding strength in pain. When the organizer called me, I hesitated at first. Me? Speaking about strength? I almost laughed. But then I remembered Grandma's words from the diary. Stand up even if your voice shakes. The day of the event, I stood in front of a small crowd, about 30 faces looking up at me. My palms were sweaty, but my heart was steady. I began with honesty. I once believed that silence was respect, I said, that keeping quiet meant being a good daughter. But I learned the hard way that silence can destroy you. I told them about the cake, how something so small became a turning point in my life. I spoke about shame, misunderstanding, and forgiveness. When I finished, there was a long, still silence, the kind that means your words have reached people's hearts. Then, applause. Afterward, a young girl approached me. She looked no older than 16. My mom always tells me I'm a disappointment, she said softly, but hearing you made me realize, maybe it's not me, maybe she's just hurt too. I hugged her tightly. Exactly. But remember, her pain doesn't have to become yours. That night when I got home, my mother was waiting in the living room. I saw your speech online, she said quietly. You were incredible. I smiled. Thank you, Mom. She took a deep breath. And I was wrong, Daisy. About so many things. I raised you to care too much about what people think, when I should have raised you to care about what you think. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from peace. Months passed, and my bakery grew into a small business called Daisy's Table. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, built from broken pieces that I turned into something beautiful. My mom started helping part-time, handling orders and smiling at customers, a sight I once thought I'd never see. Even my father, who had once been distant, began dropping by with tea and snacks, calling me our little entrepreneur. The house that once echoed with judgment now smelled of sugar, laughter, and second chances. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat with my mom on the porch. She handed me the old diary again, now wrapped in a fresh blue ribbon. I think it's time you keep this, she said. It belongs to strong women. Your grandmother, me, and now you. I held it close. I'll keep it safe. She smiled faintly. No, don't just keep it safe. Keep it alive. Pass it on someday, with your story added. Her words lingered in my heart. Because she was right. Strength should never be buried. It should be shared, just like Grandma's words found me when I needed them most. A year later, I baked another cake. Same flavor as my graduation one, but with a twist. I decorated it with 3 names written in delicate frosting: Aisha, Nadia, and Daisy. 3 generations of women, all broken once, all healed differently, but connected by resilience. When I placed that cake on the table, surrounded by laughter and love, I finally understood. The shame I once carried wasn't mine to bear. It belonged to a society that silenced women for too long. But not anymore. Not in my family. As I watched my mom cut the first slice and hand it to me, she said with a proud smile, "You turned pain into purpose, Daisy." I smiled back. "And you turned silence into strength." The past no longer haunted us. It guided us. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all.